Let's talk about ways that some couples can communicate during conflict.
Okay, so one of the things that's extremely important before I get started is just for couples to understand what you want to do is you want to be able to guard against that chronic presence of what we call continued residence of just negative words and behaviors that you may be displaying with each other. And so there's a gentleman, his name is John Gottman, and he's well respected. He's a researcher and a psychologist, and what he did is he developed the four horsemen of Acropolis. And what this is these are ways through his research that he learned that there's like four things that generally happens in a relationship where couples are not they're not communicating effectively with each other. And so he described these terms as criticism, contempt, and also defensiveness and stonewalling. So when we look at criticism, we're looking at these negative statements that we may say to our partners. And so this may be something that's going to certainly, it's going to cause a negative effect on their character, on their personality. And so we're using words that really attack those areas, those core pieces. And we're using things like, you never do this, like you're never going to do this. And so it's basically like those you or yours kind of statements. You're not any good, or things never get done. Now, what we want to do is we want to really guard against that, because what happens when we start those contempt communicational patterns, it then opens the door for more of the horsemen. So, what we actually want to do is work on those I statements. So, we want to be able to communicate our needs and our concerns with our partners, but to do it in an effective way. And we're all guilty of this. So this is not like a battering thing for couples. It's just that all couples go through one of the four horsemen of Acropolis. And so we just want to be aware and use those I statements, like I said, when we're talking about criticism. And we want to be able to recognize that when this starts, that's probably where renovation is most needed. And so we want to be able to focus on the things that are going right. So those complaints, we want to be able to not look at so much of what's going wrong, but focus on the compliments and to do things that really complement the relationship. Now, when we think about contempt, we're thinking about things that have maybe cropped up over time in our relationship. And so, these are words that have been maybe said to us or we've said to our partner. Typically, it's like name calling, there's sarcasm, there's mockery, just things that make the partner feels worthless or disrespected. And so we want to really guard against that. And we want to remember that those harmful words that we use, we can't take them back. So once we're over that emotional roller coaster where we've said those things, the scars are still remaining. And to really guard ourselves against those inner critics, like things where it says, the relationship will never last. Because sometimes, this is kind of model behavior that's been displayed for us. And then we want to focus on, not looking at or hearing those outside voices and focusing more inward into the relationship. And John Gottman talks about a 5-to-1 ratio. So he says for every negative like reaction or interaction or a deed that you do to your partner, then you've got to replace it with 5 deeds or interactions. Now, defensiveness, this is a lot of times when, the partner feels like, they're not being heard. And so what will happen a lot of times is they'll kind of attack to avoid conflict. They'll usually sort of attack their partner by making it seem like it's their mistake and as to why things have not gone well. And they make a lot of excuses. And so, what we want to do if we find ourselves being defensive, or you partners that are being defensive towards your spouse or your loved one, is we certainly want to take that responsibility for our own behavior and really focus on things that really matter in the relationship. And just keep in mind, everything that's going bad, it's not particularly our fault. These are just things that go on within the relationship. We're constantly having those developmental changes that's going on, things that's occurring. So definitely use those active listening skills are well, are honored very well. But and then when we talk about stonewall, and this is a lot of times this happens when our partner feels extremely overwhelmed. They're feeling ignored, they're feeling invalidated, and so what they want to do is hide, like they want to just kind of, not be a part of the interaction because they feel like, again, they're not, being heard. And so here we want to really keep in mind that when our relationship gets to a point where it's starting to collapse, we want to be vulnerable enough, each of us, to take responsibility for our own part and why the relationship may not be going so well, and not constantly, shifting the blame. And then definitely when it gets to that place where we're stonewalling and things get out of control, we want to take a break and let our heart rates come down. And sometimes it's usually about 20-30 minutes. And then, you're sort of collecting your thoughts, you're doing reflection, again, taking responsibility. And then you come back and you revisit at some point because you still want to be able to talk about those situations and those hard topics. So again, in order to sometimes make a relationship long lasting and satisfying, you got to create that space, that peaceful place for both of you to kind of dwell in. So again, I hope that these points have been helpful.
Yeah.